Americans now believe they need $1.4 million in order to retire. That is according to the Planning and Progress survey done by Northwestern Mutual, which is done on an annual basis. But when you dig into the data, something doesn't add up. That number is up $200,000 from last year. And on the surface, that feels like the story. And truly, this is starting to feel like a reoccurring theme. Wow, one more article telling us that retirement is expensive. Wow, one more article telling us we need more money than we thought. Wow, one more article saying we need more than $1 million in order to make our retirement dream come true. Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. Yes, that number is powerful and yes, it gets clicks, and a version of that number, $1 million plus, seems to show up in nearly every other personal finance article we tend to read. But the thing is, that's not your number. And more importantly, that's not even the real issue here. When you go just one layer deeper into this report, the story completely changes. Yes, people think they need $1.46 million, but at the exact same time, 54% of Americans believe they'll be financially prepared for retirement. And at first glance, that sounds encouraging until you look at some of the other data across generations. Nearly 1 in 4 people have saved less than 1 year of their income. A huge percentage of people have less than 3 times their income saved. And maybe most shocking of all, 26% of Gen X, people nearing retirement, haven't even started saving. Now I want to pause on that for a second because Gen X really matters for this conversation. This is the group of people born between 1965 and 1980. So that means as of 2026, they are 46 to 61 years old. So this is the group really on the cusp of retirement. If you're a millennial like me, we still have time to adjust. If you're part of Gen Z and just starting out, if you've put anything away into your investments, you're probably already in great shape. If you're a younger Gen X, you likely still have time to adjust. But for those who are on the older side of Gen X, when retirement is 5, 10, 15 years away, this is when the conversation really needs to shift. This is when advice needs to become personal. 49% of Gen X believe they'll be prepared for retirement. That sounds pretty decent, almost half. But let's look at one other data point. More than half have 4 times their income or less saved. Let's pause on that for a second, because it should feel hard for both of those things to be true at the same time. You can't have high confidence and low preparation, yet that seems to be exactly what we're seeing. So this really tells us this is a behavioral issue. What we're seeing within the exact same data set is something we see a lot of in personal finance, and that is an overconfidence bias. We feel like we're on track even when the numbers say we're not. When we focus on a specific number, like $1 million, or in this situation, $1.46 million, it can give you a false sense of clarity, like you have this specific target. Like you have a plan. Now you just need to make progress towards that number. But the thing is, retirement doesn't really work like that because $1.46 million for 2 people can look like very different lifestyles because every household has different income needs, different social security strategies, different tax situations, different timelines, different risk exposure. And if you anchor yourself to the wrong number, you might be solving the wrong problem entirely. You may not be solving your problem. And I actually think there's something deeper going on here. I think on some level, people know this $1 million narrative isn't true. Because if that number were true, most Americans would already be in trouble. Think about it. There are millions of Americans today living on $60,000, $70,000, or $80,000 a year, supporting families, paying mortgages, living full lives. We've seen this firsthand. Our parents, our grandparents, friends, neighbors, people who retired without $1 million, and they made it work. So that's really the tension. On the one hand, we have articles telling us that we need $1.5 million in order to be able to retire. But on the other hand, we have lived experience that tells us something completely different. And when those two things don't match, we don't resolve it logically. We resolve it emotionally. We tell ourselves, oh, I'll figure it out later. I'll probably be fine, or it'll all just work itself out. And that's where the real risk is, because people tend to get caught between these fear-based headlines and real-life examples that seem to contradict them. So instead of focusing on building their own personal plan, they sort of live in this gray area. And that's exactly why this conversation matters so much. We need to get out of this gray area. We need to move past the fear-based headlines and focus on building our own personal plans. So instead of debating the number, let's actually build a real plan and see what it looks like. If we look at a household in the Gen X age range, let's call it 55 years old. We'll say we have a couple that's 55 years old. The median income for a household in this age bracket is about $85,000 to $95,000 a year. So for our example, we'll split the difference and we'll call their income $90,000 a year. We'll also assume that this household has done a lot of things right. Maybe they've saved about 3 times their income. So they have about $270,000 invested. And if we take a moment to look at Fidelity's recommendations for where you should be at this age, this household would feel extremely behind. But let's put that aside for a moment. And if we compare that to our headline number of $1.46 million, it still doesn't feel like a lot. But stick with me for a second. A lot of times when we're looking at retirement, I feel like we're looking at it through the lens of our working years. We think of it like, I need an income, and that income is probably going to have to come fully from my investments. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. And I know I get a lot of pushback on this channel for including Social Security in a lot of my examples for those who are age 62 or older when they retire. But the reality is over 90% of Americans rely on Social Security as a meaningful source of income in retirement. And yes, this is a system that is currently in need of changes and reform. But those will happen. Social Security will be there in some form going forward. So we're going to factor it in. Let's paint the full picture. This is a household that has $270,000 invested today. They're contributing $4,500 per year, or a savings rate of just 5%. Let's assume they earn 8% annually over the next 10 years. Here's what happens. That $270,000 grows to about $583,000. Their contributions, they add another $65,000. So in total, they end up with roughly $650,000. Now, this is really important. It took just 10 years to double their $270,000, to more than double it. It probably took them years or even decades to build up that original $270,000. But then we start to notice compounding really working its magic, and we more than double their portfolio in just a decade. This is why I always come back to one of my favorite sayings, where we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in a year, but we tend to underestimate what we can accomplish in a decade. Now let's walk this couple into retirement. Now let's assume this couple reaches retirement and each of them receives about $2,500 per month in Social Security benefits. Today, the average Social Security benefit for a retiree is just over $2,000 a month. But we're going to assume that if we go 10 years down the road with wage increases and cost of living adjustments, that this average Social Security benefit is going to increase a bit. So that's how we got our number. So together, that's $5,000 per month from Social Security. Now let's talk about their lifestyle. If they're earning $90,000 today, and we assume a modest 2% annual increase in income, in 10 years, they'd need about $120,000 per year to support that same lifestyle. So yes, their income grows during this time, but so too do their expenses. Now let's factor in their investments. At this point, they have about $650,000. And let's assume a starting withdrawal rate of 5.5%. We're going to assume they're willing to use a flexible withdrawal strategy, that their plan is to spend more in the early years of their retirement, and that they will reduce their spending gradually over time as they enter into their 70s and 80s, and this would reduce the pressure on their portfolio. From the portfolio, that gives them about $35,000 per year, or roughly $3,000 per month. So now let's combine everything. Social Security plus investment income, that gives them $8,000 per month total in retirement. Now compare that to their pre-retirement income. We said they worked up to an income of $120,000 a year. So this is going to give them roughly an 80% replacement ratio as they head into retirement. And for many households, this is sufficient. But also look at those numbers again. We're nowhere near 1.46 million. We're nowhere near that headline number. Now, of course, whether or not this works depends on their specific lifestyle and their expenses. But if they were living on roughly $120,000 prior to retirement, it's very likely that going into retirement that they would be able to live on an income like that or a little bit less. It gets even better if they go into retirement with a fully paid off home, fully paid off cars, and reduced fixed expenses for their lifestyle. That gives them a lot of flexibility. And this is why I feel like that $1 million or $1.46 million number is so overplayed, because you can absolutely have a wonderful quality of life, your same quality of life, on a number that's less than that for the vast majority of people. So what is this data actually telling us? Because I don't really think this report is about how much people think they need. I think this report is pointing to a disconnect between what people believe and how they behave in real life. 48% of Americans believe they might outlive their savings, but at the same time, 36% have taken no steps to address that risk. That tells us that people may be aware of the risk, but they don't know how to translate that risk into an actionable plan. Because when the conversation is framed around $1 million or $1.5 million, it can feel kind of abstract, like you've either hit this number or you haven't. And when planning feels that way, it's very easy to disengage. So this is really a planning gap. It's not a savings problem and it's not a behavior problem. It's really the space between knowing that something matters and knowing what you can actually do to fix it. The biggest risk is going into retirement without a very clear, adaptable strategy that looks at your income, your expenses, and your risk tolerance. Now, I actually want to take one more moment to push back a bit more on this $1.46 million number for a second. Let's round it up to $1.5 million just to keep the math easy. Because if somebody retires today with $1.5 million and they use a 4% withdrawal rate, which I think we can all assume is fairly conservative in today's modern environment, that'll give you about $60,000 per year in income. And that's before we factor in anything else. Let's assume we have a retiree who's in their 60s, so we can layer in their Social Security benefits, and let's assume they're receiving the average Social Security benefit of $2,000 per month. That's going to give them an additional $24,000 a year, so that plus their investments is going to give this single household an income of $84,000 a year. Now let's take the same scenario, but let's make it a dual income earning household, and let's assume that both individuals in this household earn the average Social Security benefit. So ultimately, this is going to give us $48,000 a year from Social Security. Then we throw in our investments. That household is generating about $108,000 per year in retirement. Now let's pause for a minute, because of course, how much you need to make your retirement work depends on your personal situation. It depends on your lifestyle, your expenses, and your goals. But if we zoom out and look at retirees as a whole, the typical retiree is not living on $100,000 a year, not even close. According to the Consumer Expenditure Survey from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which tracks real spending, not estimates, here's what we see. For retirees ages 65 to 74, spending is typically around $60,000 to $65,000 per year. And this is actually the highest spending phase of retirement. Then something really interesting happens. Once retirees move into age 75 and beyond, spending drops to about $50,000 to $55,000 per year. So not only is the typical retiree not spending $100,000 a year, but what we see is that their spending actually declines over time. Now, again, remember, this is not personalized. This is not your situation, but it does give us a good reference point. Because when we compare what people think they need, about $1.5 million, and what that actually produces, about $60,000 per year, then we would add in any other income sources on top of that. And what retirees actually spend, closer to $50,000 to $65,000 a year, there is a very clear disconnect. And this is exactly why I think we should welcome the pushback on this $1.5 million number. Because for the vast majority of people, depending on the situation they're walking into, this level of savings very well could be overfunding retirement. Now, is that a bad position to be in? Absolutely not. And it's a far better position to be in going into retirement with too much money rather than having not enough saved. But it very well could mean working longer, saving more, and stressing more than you actually need to. As always, it comes back to knowing exactly what your expenses are and what your income sources are, because that allows you to determine if your plan works in your situation. So let's move away from that headline number for a second. What actually matters? When you strip it all down, retirement comes down to 4 things. Number 1, income, not just assets. It's not solely about your net worth, but it's about what kind of income you can generate. 2 households can have $1 million or $2 million, but if the vast majority of it is, say, tied up in your primary residence, it may not be accessible to you. You have to have a way to turn your savings and your investments into an income stream. At the end of the day, you don't spend your portfolio. You spend income, and your job is to figure out how much income you can safely generate from your portfolio for a sustainable duration of time. Number 2, Social Security strategy. This is one of the most powerful strategies you have. And if you're 20 or 30 years away from collecting Social Security benefits, it's reasonable to be cautious. It's reasonable to be conservative. You can save as if Social Security won't be there. I'm not saying it won't be there. I'm saying it's okay to be aggressive with your savings. But if you're 10 years or less away from retirement, you should absolutely be factoring Social Security into your retirement planning, because this will absolutely be a meaningful income source once you step away from the workforce. And just as important, when you claim matters, because that single decision can have a meaningful impact on the income you receive month in and month out for the rest of your life. Number 3, withdrawal strategy. This is where a lot of plans either succeed or fall apart, because there is a very big difference between a rigid withdrawal strategy and a flexible, dynamic strategy. With a rigid strategy, you have to be more conservative. But if you're willing to introduce flexibility into your plan, you can often increase your starting withdrawal rate by 1 to 2 percentage points. And that very well could be the difference between running out of money or feeling like you have enough. It could even be the difference between retiring a few years early or feeling like you have to keep working. Number 4. Flexibility. This might be one of the most underrated pieces of all. If you go into retirement with reduced fixed expenses, you increase your flexibility. If you go into retirement with a fully paid off home, so no mortgage, fully paid off cars, so no car payments, and minimal fixed expenses, you have maximum flexibility. Of course, you will still have other expenses, but they are much more manageable. The data also supports another shift in flexibility, saying about 41% of Americans plan to work in retirement. And it's not simply because they have to, but because they want to. And I think this really speaks to how we're redefining what retirement really looks like with future generations. With more flexible work options, with more remote opportunities, people are choosing to stay engaged longer. Retirement doesn't have to be a hard stop. And that flexibility, whether it's part-time work, lower expenses, or adaptable spending, that gives your plan durability. So when you hear headline numbers like 1.46 million, I don't want you to chase them blindly, because that number means nothing to you unless it's actually connected to your plan. And all of the retirement data out there overwhelmingly does not support the idea that the vast majority of Americans need $1.46 million. And remember, people tend to struggle most when they don't have a clear plan, when their behavior does not match their goals, when they choose a random number rather than a strategy for their life. So your job is to build a plan that actually works for your life. As a quick reminder, if you're approaching Medicare age or thinking about making changes to your plan in the upcoming year, I have an affiliate link for a company that I partnered with called Chapter, as well as a phone number linked down below. They offer completely unbiased Medicare guidance. They can review your current plan, compare alternate plans, and really just make sure you're in the best possible situation for your own personal situation. Again, phone number and links are down below if that's something you're interested in. I'm proud to partner with them. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. I caught it early, caught it before the first clip. I didn't have my microphone on. We're good. We got it now. Okay. But when you look in the data, personal art. Oh, okay. We got this. $25,000 a month. You're going to be sitting pretty. On that $1.5 million income that can to be more conservative. I don't know if you heard that. Sometimes like my throat gurgles. Is that a thing? That's what I always call it. Like my throat gurgles. I don't know. I feel like other people probably don't have that. I'm just a weirdo. It's okay. It's okay to be weird. You can often increase, so focus on the word often. It's with more remote opportunities. They offer completely unbiased Medicare guidance. Oh my God.